Welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, continuing today in 2020 Park Recap, where I recap the 22 national parks I visited in the summer of 2020. Near the end of my RV trip in June, we went to Great Basin National Park in Nevada. An underrated place that I highly recommend. Let's get into it. First of all, the night before we stayed in Valley of Fire State Park, which is only about a half hour, I'd say, from Las Vegas. It's a very nice place, actually. Some cool red rocks, some hikes, good campground, a few lizards here and there. I definitely recommend visiting this place if you're in the Las Vegas area because, though I'm personally not a fan of the casinos and other attractions you normally get in Nevada, the natural beauty is surprisingly great here. And I think this is the part of Nevada that people aren't seeing but definitely should see. It's a really great place. And now for actual Great Basin. The big issue is that it's hard to get to. I'd say we drove 4 hours from Las Vegas to Great Basin, and there's really no gas or anything on the way, very few towns. You have to drive around the mountains to get to from Las Vegas to Great Basin. It's a really, really difficult one to get to. However, it's a worthwhile drive because the park is really awesome. The mountains are incredibly beautiful, jutting out of this giant desert that doesn't have a whole lot going on. And there's some really great stuff here. So, for the actual experience in Great Basin, Wheeler Peak is the main thing to do. Normally, we would do the really long hike and challenge ourselves, but we got here in the afternoon. And Wheeler Peak is a really long hike. We would not have had time that day. We went to the visitor center at Great Basin. It was closed, but we were able to see some views from there. And we just decided to drive up the Wheeler Peak Drive, which goes up a good 5,000 feet, by the way. You would not believe how fast it goes. It's like 12 miles, you're 5,000 feet higher, and you're looking down on the giant desert you were just in. It's really cool to be that high on the drive. I really enjoyed that. You get to stop at a few overlooks to see Wheeler Peak. And pretty close to the end of the road is the Mather Overlook. I don't actually know how you pronounce that for some reason. You can see Wheeler Peak. And then there's the Bristlecone Glacier Trail. We saw this chipmunk on that trail. And I must say this is a top-notch trail in a national park. You don't go super high. It's not the most challenging hike. But there's a nice creek at the beginning. You can see Teresa Lake, which is small but a very pretty one, with the large Wheeler Peak nearby it. A very beautiful sight as seen here. And of course, given the name, there are bristlecone pine trees. The oldest trees in the world, in fact. I personally really like the idea of being in a historical place or place full of old living things or structures because it somewhat feels like a walk back in time. The views of Wheeler Peak are also quite beautiful on this trail. But I do really like seeing these record-breaking old rides. It's really good stuff. Old things like the trees. These are some of my favorite trees in any national park. Sorry, I just said rides. Not sure what I was thinking. The hike is really fun. You can still look down on the desert at certain points. There are a few signs that are around the older and larger trees. Pretty cool stuff. A really interesting sight and really fun. And once you get to the end of the trail, you get to see this glacier. The only glacier in Nevada, in fact. And it's right at the mountain. You get to look up to the top. Really beautiful stuff. To get the best pictures, you may have to be pretty careful around the rocks. But it's a really, really fun experience. This hike is fantastic. And I highly recommend, if you go to Great Basin National Park, to do this hike. If you want to do Wheeler Peak instead, I understand. I have not been on that one. But this is a fantastic one. Wheeler Peak's a beautiful mountain. Being that high up is really cool. And the idea of seeing such old living things is fascinating. It's a really enjoyable hike. Highly recommended. As for wildlife in this park, we didn't see a whole lot. A few insects here and there. Some Clark's nutcrackers at a certain point. Flying around, very difficult to get a picture of. We mostly just enjoyed the bristlecone pines as far as plants and animals go. But still, really great park. However, as we were leaving the Bristlecone Trail, we did stumble across some wildlife. We were very surprised to see a deer that my party that had not gone on the trail was talking about. There were actually 3 different deer. Each picture only has one in it, but it was really cool to see these deer. I always like seeing deer in national parks. I tend to see them in a lot. And then there was this. This video is a bit blurry because it was taken with my iPhone. But as we left the park, we saw tons of pronghorn antelope running around. I know this is really bad quality, but it was such a cool sight to be driving with these pronghorn. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Great Basin is an absolutely underrated national park that I definitely recommend you visit. The hikes are fantastic. There's some wildlife. It's very beautiful. Great scenic drive. There's also a cave system when COVID is not an issue. You have to do tours with that. It's really great. I definitely think you should go. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. And happy Thanksgiving.